literature. And Alana, let's pick up where we left off the last time by giving you an opportunity to continue your discussion. I must say that I've been somewhat impressed by the information that you've given us so far, and we look forward to the same kind of information during the second segment. Let's give you an opportunity to start talking about African American literature.
Well, for all of you just tuning in, my name is Alana McLaughlin, born August 27th, 2002, and I am here to talk about African American literature. Now, in the first segment of the show, I talked about slave narratives, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Phillis Wheatley, and Harriet Beecher Stowe. Now, I left off in the first segment about to talk about the Harlem Renaissance, which I would like to pick up now. Now, see, the Harlem Renaissance was basically what African Americans call the blossoming of African American literature and arts. Not only were books written, but songs made, and just we really just embraced our culture during this period of time. And I'm not saying that we don't still do that, because we do. Now, famous writers from the Harlem Renaissance, Jordan Hurston, Langston Hughes, a bunch of other people, and they actually some came together to create a magazine called Heat magazine. And Heat magazine was a magazine. Fire magazine was a magazine where the African Americans could get published, which was not very common at that time. And when they got published, it was in this primarily African American magazine, and so people would buy it and read into this, and that's really how that's how the Harlem Renaissance started. And then Jordan Hurston published Their Eyes Are Watching God, which was actually formed into a movie. And Langston Hughes wrote many poems and books and stories. And during this whole period, African Americans really sought out to just show that they have a culture too, that nobody can hold them back from embracing themselves. Now, also during the Harlem Renaissance, there many people. It wasn't just stories or songs or just dancing or festivity. It was also sermons, and it was a time where black people were at a high point in life. And another Harlem Renaissance type era was the pre-19th century era with Phillis Wheatley, the first black woman to ever be published, and the second black person to ever be published. Now, Phillis, if you don't know who she is, Phillis Wheatley was a woman who was sold into slavery at the age of 7, whose slave owners really saw that she had true poetic talents. So they published some of her stories, and that's how she rose to fame. Now, people like Jupiter Hammond praised her work because she was just so powerful in her writing. And I remember reading something that said that Jordan Hurston and people who created Fire magazine were also inspired by Phillis, and Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. How they all this has so many things in common, but really something I see in common with all of them is how they all give a voice to the voiceless. They speak for people who can't speak for themselves. Like Harriet Tubman would speak out about slavery, and even though she was a free slave, she still spoke out. And that's something that most people wouldn't do about slavery at the time, white or black, any race, because that was the unspoken genre of the time. And I applaud her for her bravery and for being one of the most famous Underground Railroad conductors of her time, of that time. She went back to Maryland over and over and over again for more than 8 years, and she took slaves, and she carried a loaded revolver so that people would listen to her. And I just applaud her for her bravery, because she knew that she could get caught, but she believed in herself, and she believed that the Lord would carry her, and that's just what He did. Now, going from the Harlem Renaissance to this modern era. Now, one of the most famous writers of this time is Miss Toni Morrison. Now, Toni wrote many stories, almost just like Phillis Wheatley, but a modern version of Phillis Wheatley. And also, there are many writers and many actors who embrace the African American culture. Oprah Winfrey, for instance, she has her own network and show, and she's inspiring to me personally, because I think because she just talks out about how she believes the African Americans can do more than they are right now, that we can be the leaders of the world. African American women, men, children, teens, we can be in a high, like Mr. Barack Obama, the first African American president. That was a big accomplishment for our community because nobody ever expected that. And I can't wait to see the first African American woman president. And she gives power to the powerless. And you know, people like just humanitarians all around. Nelson Mandela, for instance, he was not about to give up. When he knew that he was in danger, he kept fighting, knowing that he could be arrested at any time or he could be killed or shot at any time. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all these people, even though they weren't writers or singers in the Harlem Renaissance, they were all a part of a big span of the African Americans at their highest point. When we were at the top, and we still are at the top in our community. Because the more we speak out and the more we write and sing and draw, because soon you'll be seeing so many African American people, you know, she's the Secretary of State and the president of so-and-so. And you know what? This is what all these people want, starting from the pre-19th century all the way to right now, 2014. We've been fighting, and you know what? We stand out and we talk out, and that's what has gotten us this far. And so basically, people such as civil rights leaders, even though they weren't writers or singers, they wrote books. Freedom writers, the Little Rock Nine, books were written about them. They didn't have to write a book to change the world because they show African American people that if we can do it, you can do it. And recently we went to go see the Nelson Mandela movie, Mandela, A Long Walk to Freedom, and I learned so much about him. I mean, he was a very courageous man. I didn't know much about him before I watched the movie, and I just sat there and I thought, wow, if he can do this and if he can march and if he can keep a straight face even though he knows that he could be killed at any time, he still walks for freedom because he wanted his people to feel free, and he wanted them to have a voice. He wanted him just like Martin Luther King. He wanted me to be able to walk to McDonald's and to be able to order in a line next to a Caucasian person. He wanted me to be able to sit in a studio and record a show to African American people. He wanted us to be able to have rights that at the time we didn't think we would have.
Very good. And of course, let's take this second commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll continue our conversation. We'll be back with this audience following this very, very short commercial break.